This morning, Eric.
Thank you so much, Wyatt. Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. As Wyatt said, my name is Eric Reese, and I'm the Arkansas State Manager for the Human Rights Campaign. So over this last week, as y'all are probably have heard and know, we've seen two bills that would impact LGBT people sent to our governor's office, Governor Hutchinson's office, including a bill that was sent to him late on Monday night that would specifically discriminate against transgender children. The bill also, SB 354, would ban transgender girls from participating in sports, including extracurricular and school sports at the elementary, the middle, high school, and collegiate level, consistent with their gender identity. While this bill is the furthest to advance in Arkansas, it's part of a slate of anti-transgender bills that are being pushed this session, and today's press call will be focused on sharing those stories of those who would be affected if this bill and other anti-transgender legislation were to be signed into law. Talking about the implications of this bill and others like it across the country, and talking about the path forward for these efforts to discriminate. So this morning, I am joined by Chris Attig, a father of a transgender son here in Arkansas. Also joined by Holly Dixon, the Executive Director of the ACLU of Arkansas, Katherine Oakley, the Human Rights Campaign State's Legislative Director and Senior Counsel. Also, we hope to expect the voice of Willow Brashears, who's a young transgender woman in Arkansas. She hasn't joined us just yet, but hopefully she'll be joining us later on. So thank you. And with that, I want to introduce Chris Attig, the father of a transgender son here in Arkansas. Please go ahead, Chris.
Hi, my name is Chris Attig. Before I start, I'd like to speak directly to the trans community in Arkansas as a real loving father should. No matter what the state of Arkansas does to you, you are loved. We will prevail against their hatred. Stay alive no matter what, you belong here. I want you here in Arkansas. We want you here in Arkansas. I come here today as an Arkansan, the father of a transgender son, a veteran, a lawyer, and a businessman. There are thousands of men in this state who are the fathers of children who are transgender, and many fear speaking out because they fear losing their job, being kicked out of their church, or shunned in their community. But I do not think that there is a father in this state who thinks that the Arkansas legislature or the Arkansas governor should have a voice in making their family's private medical decisions, deciding which of their kids can and cannot play sports, or telling their kids what names they have to use. I own 3 businesses here in the state of Arkansas and pay tens of thousands of dollars in taxes to the state. I employ transgender workers. These anti-trans bills hurt my business and all small and medium-sized businesses in this state by putting us at a competitive disadvantage. Because diversity and inclusion are known to be good for business, and because discrimination imposes enormous productivity costs on our businesses, these bills will force companies to shut their doors and even leave this state. No population, no nation, no state, and no economy in the history of this world has ever flourished under policies of hatred. Business will leave this state. New business will not come to this state because of these bills. These bills have no chance of being upheld. They clearly violate the US Constitution. 6 of the sitting Supreme Court justices have already agreed that discrimination on the basis of being transgender is unconstitutional discrimination on the basis of sex, and that will not change. The state of Arkansas will waste hundreds of thousands of dollars of our scarce taxpayer dollars defending these laws, only to find out what we already know. These laws are unconstitutional, and in my opinion, they're un-American. Meanwhile, 1 in 5 children here in Arkansas will continue to suffer from childhood obesity. 1 in 4 of our children here in Arkansas will still not know where their next meal is coming from, and 1 in 4 of our children here in Arkansas will live in abject poverty. I served as a captain in the U.S. Army from 1993 to 2004. I'm proud to tell you that some of the soldiers and airmen and Marines I served with were transgender. Many more are the parents of transgender children. I served my country to defend the values of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for each and every one of our citizens. I am saddened beyond words to see that there are those in this state who would, for no reason at all, seek to deprive other citizens of their life, of their liberty, and of their pursuit of happiness simply because they do not understand or are afraid of people who are transgender. Those actions disrespect all of the men and women, cis and transgender, who have died for the very freedom of the very people who now seek to persecute them. People who are transgender are everywhere. They are valuable members of our society, our culture, and our nation. They belong in Arkansas, and we want them in Arkansas. I implore each and every state senator in Arkansas to soundly reject this anti-transgender legislation. Should the legislature continue to persecute our trans citizens here in Arkansas, I implore Governor Hutchinson to kill these bills. Otherwise, he is signing a death warrant for many trans youth in this state. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those remarks, Chris. We truly, truly appreciate it, especially your opening. Next, we're going to have the Executive Director of the ACLU here in Arkansas, Holly Dixon. Holly, please.
Hello, everyone. I'm sure you're all aware that there is a whole swath of legislation under the dome this session attacking all of our individual rights and liberties, from the right to vote to free speech, racial justice, immigrants' rights, reproductive liberty, you name it. There's a power grab from the people of the state of Arkansas. These bills are particularly distressing and concerning because of how harmful they will be to transgender youth. The healthcare bills are unconstitutional. They've been challenged in courts around the country and been found to violate the Equal Protection Clause in the Affordable Care Act. Sports bills, also unconstitutional, violate trans women and girls' constitutional rights to equal protection under the law, privacy, possibly be free from unlawful search under the Fourth Amendment, as well as Title IX. And when we want to subject a subset of the population to scrutiny and policing by one another and by the government, we're going to subject all women and girls to that very same scrutiny. And the very notion that we need to protect girls from trans girls who are girls sends the wrong message to girls and women in this state and in this country and around the world that they need protection from boys and men. Those are the words of the sponsor. That's the intent of the sponsor. And they're just simply misguided and wrong. So like Chris, we implore the members of the General Assembly to stand up against this harmful, unconstitutional legislation and implore the governor to do the same.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you for always standing with us, particularly from the LGBTQ Arkansans here in Arkansas. Next, we're going to have Katherine Oakley, who's our senior analyst at the Human Rights Campaign, to share her remarks.
Hello, everybody, and I've never been accused of being brief, so I'm going to go for slightly longer than my co-panelists, but I know that we're going to have time for questions, so you can make them answer your questions, and they'll be much more interesting than I am, I'm sure. I'm Katherine Oakley. I'm the State Legislative Director and Senior Counsel here at the Human Rights Campaign. And I just want to give a little bit of a national overview of what we're seeing. And across the country this year, we have seen more anti-transgender bills filed this year than ever before. More than in 2016, the year of North Carolina's bathroom bill, which I'm going to mention again in just a moment. But this has been an unprecedented year for attacks against the transgender community. And as Holly mentioned, this is in particular this year, the focus has been attacking transgender youth, their access to medical care and their access to sports, particularly in a year where we've been isolated from each other and children in particular have had a really difficult time and not being able to be at school, not being able to be with their friends. Isolating them further in this moment is a truly unconscionable choice. But I want to start to talk about Arkansas strangely by talking about South Dakota. So please bear with me here for just a moment. This bill lands on Governor Hutchinson's desk in an interesting moment as we are seeing, as I said, this onslaught of bills across the country. And last Friday, Governor Noem in South Dakota made a sort of interesting choice in terms of how to handle the anti-trans sports bill that was on her desk. She had tweeted that she was delighted to sign the bill, but then when the moment came, she actually issued a veto. And she has a lot of justifications for the reasons that she did that. She says that she doesn't like the way in which this bill discriminates. She wants it to discriminate in a slightly different way. But I think the most important thing that she recognized, while she did not, I think, have a light bulb go off about trans equality, which would have been ideal, I do think that she understood the lesson of HB2, which was passed, by the way, 5 years ago yesterday. The North Carolina General Assembly, in 11 hours, introduced, passed, and the bill was signed into law, the only law mandating discrimination against transgender people to have passed in this country. Everyone, I'm sure, on this call knows what came after that, incredible outcry. And Governor Noem responded to that kind of pressure in South Dakota. It is a factoid that's perhaps a little bit lost to history, but South Dakota passed a bathroom bill through both legislatures and sent that to the governor just a few weeks before HB2 was passed. And the Republican then governor of South Dakota vetoed it in that moment. And spared South Dakota from the outcome that eventually came in North Carolina. Governor Noem's veto came after incredible pressure, including pressure from the South Dakota Chamber of Commerce, the Sioux Falls Chamber of Commerce, the reminders of a new Amazon fulfillment center that's coming to the state, protests by transgender advocates, and of course, a reminder from the South Dakota High School Activities Association that there is in fact no issue with transgender girls playing sports in South Dakota, that there are currently, to their knowledge, no transgender girls participating in sports in South Dakota, and that when there were transgender girls participating in sports in South Dakota, there was no problem. And that is another theme that we are seeing nationwide, is that the proponents of this legislation are completely unable to point to instances in which there have been problems in their state. And I think that's a really, really important thing to point out. As both Chris and Holly mentioned, it is not constitutional. It is not the equal protection of the law when a small group of people is targeted by a law to be harmed, and there is no justification for harming those people. That is a violation of the equal protection of the law. And again, I don't think that Governor Noem is a hero for transgender equality, but I do think that she recognized that there's true harm that comes from signing a bill like this, true reputational and economic harm that can come to a state. And, that was certainly the case in North Carolina, which saw NCAA games pulled, the NBA All-Star game was pulled, major employers halted their investments. States refused to allow taxpayer-funded travel to North Carolina, including for university teams that were attending sporting events. And there were many other economic consequences. And that's something that Governor Noem did recognize and talked about in her remarks. At the same time, she admitted this is not currently a problem in the state. And so as I wrap up, I just want to point out that the same groups that are pushing this legislation across the country, we have almost 50 bills, almost 50 anti-transgender sports bans filed in the country right now. These are bills that have been filed over the course of the last 2 sessions. Transgender youth have, of course, been playing sports at school for quite a long time and are allowed to do so in about 16 states across the country. So there's really no justification for this new surge in bills other than to say that they're being pushed by these anti-LGBTQ groups whose only priority is to discriminate against transgender people and to pull back equality. They don't care about South Dakota. They don't care about Arkansas, and they definitely don't care about women's sports. Megan Rapinoe testified before Congress this morning about inequalities in women's sports, and she said, I quote, "As someone who's played sports with someone who is trans, I can assure you all is well, nothing is spontaneously combusting." This is not legislation that's necessary. It is completely mean-spirited. It is absolutely about continuing to discriminate. And it is only the newest iteration of the same anti-transgender legislation that HB2 5 years ago yesterday personifies. It is not about women's sports. It's never been about women's sports. And it's not about protecting trans kids. It's never been about protecting trans kids. This is 100% about putting forward a discriminatory agenda and trying to hoodwink good people into believing the misinformation and lies that these anti-LGBTQ groups have been spreading. Governor Hutchinson has a choice to make with this legislation on his desk. And just like Governor Noem did, and the governor of Utah also came out against these bills before they reached his desk, saying that he did not support them. You know, this is something, it doesn't have to be partisan. We have Republicans who are recognizing how harmful these bills are. And it is my sincere hope, and I assume I'll speak for my other panelists as well, all of our sincere hope that the governor rejects these bills when they hit his desk.
Thank you so much, Kate, and thank you again to all of our participants today. If we are joined between now and the end of this call by Willow, we will also give her a chance to share her story. In the meantime, we can open it up to questions from media. I will give everyone a chance to put their interest in asking a question into the chat, and I will call on you, and you can direct your question either to a specific participant or put the question out for any of our participants to take up and answer. So I'll give everyone a minute to enter into the chat with any requests to ask questions, and at which point I will call on you and you can unmute yourself and ask.